Hello everyone, welcome to the second lecture. This one is about revenue recognition. So here we can see that this list right here I've compiled is a list of all the main topics that you'll have to study for test 2. And currently this video we'll be covering how to do revenue recognition. So let's jump into the question. One important thing to remember when it comes to revenue recognition is that we are going to recognize revenue in proportion to the cost that we've incurred for the total project. So at each point, we're going to calculate how much costs we've incurred so far in the project and divide that by the total cost that we expect the project to cost us. This will give us a percent. And each time that we get a percent, we'll find the percent for each of the year and multiply that by the revenue figure given right here to get how much revenue we got for each independent year. And after that, we'll take into account the cost incurred during the year, this figure right here. And then after that, we'll find the profit and loss for each of the following years. So let's get started. Normally for these questions, I like to make a table. It makes it much easier to do the calculation. So costs incurred during the year. So the very first thing that we have to remember is that we'll be using this formula. So the formula goes percentage completion equals costs incurred so far divided by total project cost. So we'll find these two values for each of the years and then use it to find how much of the project completed. So for the very first year, let's get started. So first of all, let's find this figure right here, costs incurred so far. So for the first year, we've only incurred this amount, so that's 1 million. The next year, we would have incurred the 1 million from the first year and the 1,255,000 for the next year. So let's add those two together. That gives us 2,255,3. Now, for the third year, we would have incurred whatever it was for the third year, plus the second year and the first year. So doing that should get you a value of 3,840,123. Now, next, for the last year, the cost incurred, you add up all previous years, and that will give you this value. So that is 4,0,123. So all of these values, you're just using the calculator and finding these out. Next, we need to know what the total project cost is. So what the total project cost will be. So you'll realize that the total project cost will be whatever we expect this figure, expected cost till we complete the contract, that you add to the cost incurred so far. So that would be the total project cost, right? It would be any cost we've incurred so far. And to that you add any cost that you expect until the project's complete. So for the first one, it's 3 million plus 1 million, which gives you 4 million. Next, you have 1,845,000 and 2,255,000. So let's add them up. That gives us a total project cost of 4,100,000. And then we do the same for the next year. We add the costs incurred so far to the total expected contract cost. That gives us 4,800. And for the last year, we've incurred all the costs, and the total amount of costs that we've incurred is Yeah, let me write that a little better. Yeah. Now let's go ahead and use this formula and find percentage completion. The first one, you just take the top value, divide by the bottom value, and that will give you a percent. So 1 million divided by 4 million, that should give you a total of 25%. Next, we take the 2,255,000 divided by the 4,100,000, which will give you a value of 55%. Next, you take this value divided by this, which will give you 80%. And for the last year, it's obviously 100% because that's when the project completes. Now, the next step, we'll calculate how much the percent completion is for that particular year. So as you can see, this is cumulative. This is how much the project is completing in totality. Now let's see how much percent is being completed for each of the following years. So percentage completion in year. So obviously we just started the project, so it's only 25%. Next, we've reached 55% project completion, but we were at 25%. So that obviously means we finished 30% of the project in this year. The next one, we take 80%, subtract from it 55%. That tells us that 25% of the project was completed in this year. And lastly, we went from 80% to 100%, which is 20%. Perfect. Now that we know these completion percentages, we take each one of them and multiply it by the total revenue for the contract price for the project, and that will give us the revenue for each of the following years. So basically, the total revenue that we are receiving for this project is 5 million, right? Which we're going to divide over the course of these 4 years. We're going to do that by the percent that has completed within that year, the percent of costs that we've incurred so far. So let's do that. Revenue. So first we take 25% of 5 million, which gives us 1 million. Next, we take 30% of that. Sorry, this is 1,250,000. Next, you take 30% of 5 million, which gives you 1,500,000. Next, you take 25% of that, which is again 1,250. And lastly, you take 20% of that amount, and that gives you 1 million. Great. Now that we know the revenue, in order to find how much profit or loss we made for each of the years, we just have to subtract it by the costs incurred during the year, right? Which is this figure right here, the costs incurred during the year. So let's just write down, I'm going to copy this exact table back here. So costs incurred in year, 1 million, 1,255,000. And 800,000. Great. Now let's go ahead and find the profit or loss for each of the years. I recommend copying this and writing this row, even though we have the same information up here. I do recommend writing it again because it will help you know whether you made a profit or loss by looking at it instantly. So here we can see that for each of the year, we are making more revenue than we have cost. But for one of the years, you see that the cost is greater, which means for that particular year, we would have incurred a loss. That's okay. As long as the total figures add up, it's fine if we made a loss for that particular year. Because if the whole project as a whole, we are making a profit, right? So let's go ahead and see what the profit or loss for each of the years is. We just subtract it from the revenue. For the first year, it's 250,000. For the next year, it is 245. Right? Now for the next year, we are making a loss. So let's add that figure there. And for the last year, we are again making a profit of 200,000. Perfect. So that is this question complete. That's how I like to do my revenue recognition. Find it much easier to do it in this format. However, if you really want, and they ask you for only one specific year, you could always just do it directly. So assume that you are only asked to find how much revenue has been generated and what your profit and loss is for year 20x3. So in that case, you just have to calculate what's the cost incurred to date. So cost incurred to date 20x3. It'll be this figure added with this, right? So let's go ahead and do that. We add 1 million, 1,255,000, and 1,585,000, which gives us cost till year 3, which is the sum of all of those, which we have found here. But you can just add these three numbers to get the same. It gives you 3,84012. Next, find total project cost. So the question tells us that for year 3, we expect 960,000 to project completion. So we just take the 960,000 and we add it to this figure right here, and that will give us the total project cost, right? Because that will be the cost incurred till the year and the cost to complete the project. So that will give us a total value of 4,800,000. Now that you have these two values, you just have to divide them, and that will give you 80%. Right? Now that you know you made 80% in this year, you can just multiply this by the amount here. So 5 million. Or alternatively, a much easier way to do it would be to also see what the cost, what the percent for the earlier year was. So for the earlier year, you do the same thing. You find the 55,000, and then you find the 80,000. That gives you the 25%. So now you know 25% of the project was completed in this year. So you multiply that by 5 million, and that'll give you a value of 1,250,000. So that's one way to do it if you just need to know for 1 year. But I always find it easier in all circumstances to just make this table, because it's just way easier. So again, just to walk you through it, first, these are the things that are given in the question. For some questions, you may directly be given the cost incurred so far, which will make it a little easier. But for others, you may be given costs incurred during the year. So if you're given costs incurred during the year, you just add up the past values and find how much the project has cost us so far. Then to that, we add the expected project costs, and that tells us how much the project is going to cost in total. Now that we know how much cost we've incurred so far, and we know how much the project is going to cost us in total, we just divide the two, and that will give us a percent. So for each of the years, we found a percent. Now next, we just have to find out how much percent was completed during that year. So not cumulatively, as we are seeing here, but just for the individual years. So the first one is 25, 30, 25%, or 20%. Now that we know how much percent was completed in the year, we just multiply these figures by the 5 million, which is the revenue. And that will give you the revenue figures for each of the year. Then you see what the costs incurred during the year was. So this is how much you incurred in each of the individual years. And you subtract the revenue. From the revenue, subtract the cost, and that'll give you the profit or loss. And that's basically how you solve these questions. See you all for the next one.